Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Trail Talk High Pointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and today's episode is a community spotlight on the nonprofit organization Big City Mountaineers. Now, the mission of Big City Mountaineers is to provide transformative experiences in nature in the lives of people from disinvested communities. And here with me today to talk about that topic is the BCM Executive Director, David Taus, and the BCM Adventure Fundraising Manager, Linnea Delucchi. David and Linnea, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
So I like to start off by asking guests, how did you get started in the outdoors?
So I'm really fortunate to have grown up outside. It was a really, really big part of my mom's life growing up. And so then starting at a really young age, she got my brother and myself outside, skiing, not in ski school, just with her, and backpacking as well. And my uncle was a raft guide and had a boat, so we would also go rafting every summer. So
Wow.
It is really all because of my mom. She did it just with herself and me and my brother, and it was we never did summer camp. We started doing family vacations later on, but for a long time our summer vacations were backpacking. In the Sierra. I grew up in California, so yeah, they were summer backpacking trips in the Sierra with another family and my cousins.
Wow. That's amazing. And you grew up in the Sierras?
I grew up in Sacramento, which is similar in distance from the mountains to Denver. So we were an hour and a half from the ski resorts that we skied at, Sugar Bowl and Alpine mostly. We were probably longer depending on the trailhead we were going to for our backpacking trips. But yeah, I grew up in the suburbs of Sacramento, which has the South Fork of the American, which is a big whitewater area, and then lots and lots of trails in the Sierra. That was kind of our stomping grounds.
That's fantastic. What about you, David?
I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my family wasn't particularly outdoorsy, but they had the good sense to send me to YMCA summer camp. So I spent from the age of probably 6 through 21, I was at summer camp where I was outside all day and swimming in lakes and, shooting bows and arrows and hiking on trails and living with kids from all over the city. And it was just a really profound, transformative experience for me. And it became the center of what would become the rest of my career, either in outdoor something or in youth work and education. So I really owe it all to this YMCA summer camp, Camp Minneconne, that I went to as a kid.
Wow. And where in Wisconsin is that located?
It's in Hubertus. It's probably 45 minutes outside of Milwaukee itself. So pretty close, actually. But at the time, in the 80s and 90s, you felt like you were on Mars. You felt like you were a million miles away because there was no cell phones, right? There was no internet. And you really were in this little kind of bubble. And the only communication you had from the outside was your parents would mail you letters through USPS. So
what led both of you to BCM?
So I've been working in the outdoor equity space off and on since about 2016. My journey started a little bit longer, or a little bit before, a long time before then. I have a brother with severe autism, like very severe, nonverbal, and diapers, and he's 18. Will need care for the rest of his life. And so I've been helping take care of him as he had really high behaviors and often needs multiple eyes. More than one person's eyes on him. He was diagnosed at 2, so pretty much since his diagnosis. So he kind of like pushed me to study neurobiology and then get into equity space because we always had weird looks when we would go out in public, and there was this 12-year-old kid who was babbling and not and having behaviors, and we actually had families come up to us and be like, "Do you know how to control your child?"
Wow.
Thank you for your sound advice. So I started working at respite facilities, which are places that give families who have kids with disabilities a break. And we're essentially like specialized babysitters. I was a substitute teacher. I taught adaptive skiing, which is skiing for kids with cognitive and physical not even just kids, adults, with anybody with cognitive and physical disabilities. And then from there, kind of segued into like the trauma space and taught an outdoor education class at Title I schools, and then came over to BCM. Which
That's perfect.
Very much works in the outdoor equity space, and that is my passion, is increasing access to the outdoors for folks who have had less access, have been marginalized, who face a lot of barriers because it was such a big part of my childhood, and my family's gone through a number of deaths, and being outside helped with that. And so I think it's an incredibly important thing that everyone should have equitable access to.
Wow, that is super meaningful. David, what led you to BCM?
What led me to BCM? I first learned about BCM through Backpacker magazine in like 2004 or so. I've been a longtime subscriber and reader, and read about Big City Mountaineers, I think through the Summit for Someone program. And at the time I was teaching high school, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, that's everything, right? Like, it's working with youth, it's equity work, it's outdoors, and it really is like the culmination and intersection of all these things that I care about and that I've been doing. And I filed it away. I thought, oh, that's such a great organization. That's so neat. That's so neat. And went on with my life and taught high school and started some other nonprofits and worked in other nonprofits, and eventually moved to Denver right before COVID started. And I found a job posting for executive director of Big City Mountaineers, and it kind of was like, oh, I remember them. They're great. They do everything that I care about. It's youth work and equity work and nonprofits. And I never thought that I would, get the job, but I said I have to apply. So I applied, and lo and behold, it all worked out. And I'm super grateful. I still pinch myself. So I don't know if this was a long time coming, or I just got lucky, or a combination of the two, but it's an amazing fit for how I've found my career to have been experienced. And it truly is the culmination of like all these things that I've been doing and thinking about and caring about for a very, very long time.
So I want to start a little conversation about what is accessibility to the outdoors and what is equity. Because I think a mentality that people might have about outdoor accessibility might be that, well, going outside is free. Just like literally walk outside, just go to a park. How hard is it? What are some of the barriers that people face?
Yeah, there are so many.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you asking this, because I think we really do take it for granted, and in a lot of the regions that we serve, probably a lot of the folks that have come from privilege or have had access take it for granted, like California, Washington, like even like New England. It's pretty easy to be like, yeah, it's there, go do it. And just to like name a few, transportation is a big one. Whether it's because it's far, the trailhead, or the, back country, the wilderness, the out of cell service is far away. That is a big one, and that can be the fact that you don't have the time to get there. It could be that you don't have the right vehicle to get there. Maybe it's a 4x4 road. To get to those really out there places. Gear is also a really big one. Gear is really expensive. And a lot of the times we don't have the knowledge to know what gear we actually need. It could be like, we have this raincoat and that's good enough, but it's not, maybe it's a raincoat for California and it's not a raincoat for the PNW, or a raincoat for the East Coast, depending on where you're going. And that really, the gear adds up a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Another really common barrier that we don't think about is that it's really intimidating to do something when there's not people who look like you out there. And the microaggressions that can come from that, everything from like more people asking you like if you're okay, probably doesn't feel great, or more people asking if you need help, or if you need if you're lost. But doing things in community is really important and can be underemphasized. And so if there's mostly white people outside, it's hard to break into that. and make it feel like you belong and make it feel like you're supposed to be out there. There's also a lot of barriers based in history, and people have different relationships with the land. So a big, it's kind of shifting now, but a big cultural part of white people getting outside is conquering. High pointing, like, getting to the top, which is awesome and huge and cool in its own way. And a lot of relationships with the land from other communities and cultures is to more interact with it. Whether it's because they've worked the land because of slavery, or they've worked the land because of farming, or they've worked the land because it's a give and take, like maybe perhaps more in native culture. And so getting outside and the idea of the destination can be specific to one group. And so then that can actually be a barrier of like how you want to get outside and how you have gotten outside or interacted with the outdoors in the past. Is different, and a lot of people, it might be harder to find a group that gets that outside in that way. I could answer this question for a long time, but I'll give space for David too.
No, that's really good information. Thank you.
Yeah, you said that very eloquently. I think at the core of your question, it's a confusion between equity and equality. And a lot of people don't quite understand the difference. So equality is everyone gets the same thing. And people who think, the state park is there, everyone can just go. That's an equality mindset. And what Linnea is referring to is more of the equity piece, which is, is it a fair race, right? Does everyone start from the same starting place, or do some people have advantages over others? So equity then is reallocating resources so that people who start with less are able to participate equally.
Okay.
So you're disproportionately allocating things to people who have traditionally had less or still have less. And I think Linnea has named a lot of the barriers, right? Material barriers, the economic barriers, the social barriers. All of those things are things that we think about at BCM and that we do our best to address to make sure that the teenagers that go out on our trips are well equipped to have a really positive experience, and often a positive first experience in the outdoors.
Let's talk about the BCM mission. What did it start off as? And can you kind of talk about the history of BCM, and maybe has the mission evolved over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our founder, his name is Jim Kern. He is quite a guy. He's 90 years old. And back in the 80s, he was very active in backpacking and trail building. And he on the side is really involved in the Florida Trail and
cool.
The movement to have contiguous national scenic trails. He's very involved in that still, actually. But he was going to go on a backpacking trip, and he and his son were going to go with a couple friends who bailed. And he was dating a woman at the time and said, "Hey, you work in a youth services capacity. Are there any kids in your program who might want to go on a backpacking trip?" And she said, "These kids, they don't ever leave Miami. They're from Miami. They don't know about backpacking." And he said, "That's okay. Like, who's interested?" And there was one kid who raised his hand and said, I'll go. I don't know what it is, but I'll go. And they took him on a plane to Montana. He'd never been out of Florida. And you can imagine, he saw the mountains, and just his mind was blown. And the impact when they got back on Jim was like, oh, wow, there's something really important and special here. And he pursued that and eventually incorporated as a nonprofit. And at the time, it was just him and his friends volunteering their time to take some local youth out on backpacking trips. But that's really how it started. I think as the organization evolved and other people got involved and, more momentum was put behind it, BCM had to up its game a little bit, right? Because it's a risky thing to just volunteer without insurance and, other sort of risk management things to just go do that. So as a more formal organization, things had to become a little bit more rigorous. And sometime in the 90s, JanSport was kind of the initial financial supporter from the outdoor industry. And there was a gift of $100,000 that enabled BCM to really level up. And now you're not just beholden to some of the risk and safety issues, you're beholden to a community of funders in a different way. So, the progression from then to where we are now, fairly, to me at least, obvious that like you really need to tighten up your stuff. You need to make sure that you're using effective and best practices. We now don't just use volunteers. We hire guides and we have volunteers on trail. We also work directly in partnership with youth agencies and schools and after-school programs, and we insist that there's people from those programs, staff that come on the trips with the kids and with us.
Okay.
We have trainings, we have orientations, we screen and background check everyone. So, we've definitely tightened things up to be not just in compliance, but do our due diligence and make sure that the adults that are going to be stewarding these experiences for kids are the right adults that are properly equipped to manage the group, address any incidents that may come up, and just ensure that it's a good experience for a lot of teenagers who probably it's their first time doing anything like this. So that's I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're wondering, but that's kind of like the path from our origins to where we are now in terms of just how we are structured. But the mission really hasn't changed all that much. And it's 35 years old. And from the first moment, it was really all about getting youth from disinvested communities out into nature to have transformative experiences. And that hasn't changed. That's still the centerpiece of it all. The other thing that I think we do differently now is back then it was just a week-long backpacking trip. And that was the only program element that was run. So, imagine, hey, nice to meet you. Get in the van. Let's go backpacking for a week. What's backpacking? That's pretty daunting. So now what we do is we ease people into it. And we have what we call a scaffolded or progressive approach, where we work with the group during an info session, kind of propose the idea. We take interest. This is not something that's forced on anyone. It's not punitive. And they have to choose and want to do it. And then we do a day hike to start, closer to home. So they kind of get familiar with just being out on a trail. And we start to kind of approach some topics like how do you interact with the land, some just etiquette on trail, things like that. Leave no trace-ish type ideas. And then we also have an overnight after that, a front country overnight. So that may be the first time they get to sleep in a tent or cook on a stove or kind of practice those technical skills. And then after all that, we do the week-long trip. And that still is the centerpiece of the whole experience. That's really where I see the transformative thing happening. Okay. But we scaffold up to that to make sure that they can access all the benefits of that time much more quickly.
That's great. And I think those are such good skills to teach the younger generation, especially in a world where it seems like every outdoor endeavor has to be documented and posted on social media. And if it's not sensational enough, if enough people don't like it, that means that you're not doing something. And so you have to play music. And it'd be great if this next generation could simply be in the outdoors and maybe not post about it. And just, like you said, have that transformative experience on their own or with their own community. I think that those are really great skills to develop at a young age.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that certainly is our hope. We have a no phone policy, so
fantastic.
You can't take your device on trips. We do have cameras and GoPros and things that we give to each group. And we hope that they kind of document their experience collectively and are able to tell their own story through those. But it's not going to be the same as having your own phone and live streaming or whatever. This is not my world, but
there's no Bluetooth speakers on the trails, I hope.
No.
So can you guys talk about some of your favorite BCM expeditions and also talk about where they are throughout the country?
Sure. Well, I got to go on an expedition in 2022. We went to the Medicine Bow, and it's a group of mountains in southern Wyoming, and that was from our Denver region. And there was 5 youth that went on the trip, and at the time, one instructor and 2 youth agency staff and me, so 4 adults. I was undercover. I was not coming up as the executive director. I was just a volunteer, a random dude. And it was, I would say, weather-wise, a difficult trip, right? It snowed and hailed. It was windy and cold. It was not kind of this serene, bucolic, joyful experience that I would hope people have for their first backpacking trip. And I remember one night I was like sitting in my tent, just like not wanting to get out of my sleeping bag, thinking, oh, I hope they're having fun because this really sucks. But then I got out of my tent and we got under the tarp and started cooking, and everyone was kind of like singing songs and just very like positive and smiling and talking about how that's going to be a great story later. And I was really buoyed by the youth experience. They were keeping themselves very like positive about the whole thing. And I was like, man, what was I worried about? Like, they're doing great. They're loving this. And it was just really affirming to know that, like me as someone who's done a lot of backpacking and led a lot of trips for a lot of people over the years, could still benefit from being around the folks that come on our trips. And I had a better experience because of it.
Wow.
So that was really cool. I'm hoping to go on another trip this summer, but, scheduling and timing and other things I need to be accountable to. We'll see. But I do make a point to try to get out on trail at least once a year with our groups.
That's great. And Linnea, when we spoke before, when we were arranging this recording, you mentioned that you were fairly new to the organization. Are there any trips that you plan on doing?
That's kind of TBD. I will most likely be the emergency part of the emergency response chain.
Okay.
Because I'm getting my EMT, which means I need to be on call all the time. And so going on a trip, means I'm on call for one trip.
Sure. Okay.
Rather than being available for all programs across all the regions. So it's kind of up in the air. I would love to, and if I do, it would most likely be a trip in Colorado, with our yaps here.
Now, where throughout the country do these trips occur? Now, I know that you both are located in Colorado. There's a Birmingham, Minneapolis, Bay Area locations. Am I missing any?
Yeah. So our 6 spots are Denver. That's where our administrative headquarters is. Seattle.
Oh, okay.
SF Bay Area, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Boston, and this year we're opening up in Birmingham, Alabama. All of our regions do backpacking except for Minnesota. And in the Minnesota region, we do a Boundary Waters canoe trip as the culminating experience.
Yeah.
And we actually were gifted a little piece of land in Tower, Minnesota that we have a canoe camp located at. So it's a very cool spot. And it's a unique situation because that's the only region that we do paddling, and the rest of it is backpacking.
So can you talk about the differences that you see in participants before and after expeditions? And maybe can you give some insight as far as like interactions with the participants throughout expeditions, or, even in the administrative process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, most simply, the youth will show up and say, what do you mean I can't bring my phone? What do you mean I don't get to take a shower? I don't know about that. They're very nervous about it. And inevitably, by the last day, and this happened on my trip, there was a kid that said, we were walking back to the van. She's like, I could do this for another couple days. I don't miss my phone as much as I thought.
Look at that.
I was like, right on. That's so cool. So at most basic, I think there is a moment of transformation there where they hold a belief about what they want, what they need, and that belief is challenged, and they come back with a new set of beliefs about what they want and what they need and what they're capable of, which I think is pretty universal. I see that happen across the board on most to all of our trips. One thing that we are really interested in measuring is how someone's mental health and social emotional well-being is affected by this experience. And we look at 4 things right now. We look at self-esteem, self-efficacy, which is your belief in your ability to do things, empathy, and your sense of social belonging. And these are 4 psychological dimensions that we believe, are important in other parts of a kid's life and correlate with things like academic success and career trajectory and things like that. We also think that our programs affect change in those ways. And we pre and post test via surveys, very short surveys, to see how these things change from before you start to after your expedition. And what we find by and large is that they increase. So we know that, we do have a positive effect, a measured positive effect on young people in these ways. And we also compare the post-test for the expedition participants to the pre-test for their peers who didn't do any of the trips. And we find that there's a difference there as well, a positive difference. So, we feel pretty good that the connection with nature and the connection with themselves and their community that they're making is something that will kind of transcend the trail and will have implications for their lives once they get back to their day-to-day. And we have a harder time tracking longitudinally, like 6 months later, 12 months later, what the effect is. But we know that there's something there. And just anecdotally, for those of us who go backpacking or have that as a part of our life, it makes total sense, right? Like I'm a different person because of my experiences outdoors in nature, especially immersive ones, multi-day, off-trip, off-road experiences. And we see in some ways the data is bearing that out. And we just know intuitively that we can count on that happening because of the experiences that we cultivate for them.
So let's get into the Adventure for Someone program. Now, if listeners can recall, episode 49, I had on Dustin and Stacey Smoot, and I think the title of the episode was Denali for a Cause. And they are climbing Denali, I believe, in May, and they're raising money for Big City Mountaineers. Can you talk a little bit more about the program, how it started, and what is the purpose of it?
Adventure for Someone started because of Summit for Someone. And in the 2000s, Summit for Someone was a program that was adopted by Backpacker magazine, where backpacker editors would go out on climbs of iconic peaks, Mount Whitney, Grand Teton, Mount Hood, Mount Rainier. And people could join those hikes, get a gear package, and all they needed to do was fundraise to support BCM. And it was a very successful program. But I think what BCM realized is that there's a ceiling on that, right? There's only so many spots on these trips. Not everyone's interested in summiting. People want to do other stuff. So how do we widen the aperture on that? And how do we get more people interested and involved? So that's when this idea of custom challenge came out. That's what it was called at first. And the idea here is, well, if you don't want to summit for someone, that's okay. You could do whatever you want. You could ride your bike. You could paddle. You could do yoga. You could trail run. And on and on and on. And it's not limited to one peak. It's not limited to one activity. You can create your own adventure and still accomplish the same thing via peer-to-peer fundraising as you would on these Summit for Someone trips. So the idea is to be more inclusive about it, to give people more options. And what we hope is that these additional entry points can reach a wider audience. And it's not just peak baggers and alpinists, right? You can get, like I said, paddlers or yogis or skiers, or you name the activity. You can build an Adventure for Someone around it.
Adventure for Someone is now more of our primary peer-to-peer fundraising program compared to Summit for Someone. And we are growing it and trying to reach more people. Currently, it is more of a summer fundraising program. People who are doing summer adventures, in the future, I think we are hoping to get some winter adventures involved. and are increasing our community across the regions and engaging people across the regions across the US who want to do something like this. And it really is highly adaptable to what feels good to you. It doesn't have to be a through hike. It very much can be a through hike, but it can also be biking to every coffee shop within 10 miles of your house. Or one family did 1,000 hours outside with their newborn.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so like it is truly what you want. I believe in past years someone did a hot dog eating contest. There was
That's an
one guy
adventure.
who walked across the US only eating Subway. And it wasn't even like hiking trails. Like I think he did a lot of road walking to hit the subways. So like there is a very wide range in what you can do. And being on this podcast, like high pointing is a pretty awesome way to potentially get involved with adventure for someone. If you are training for, again, whatever high point, right? Pretty awesome that Dustin and Stacy are doing Denali. And also if you're trying to do a high point in your region or your county or your state, you can easily turn it into a fundraiser. It's very accessible. And then you're through your goal, you're increasing access to the youth from disinvested communities that Big City Mountaineers serves.
That's amazing. You know, my next question before I even heard your answer was going to be, what are some examples of the adventures? But the hot dogs, the subway, the newborn, that's amazing. You know, it gets people outside, right? And it gets them raising money.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's awesome.
there's companies that will do, we pledge 500 trail hours between all of us.
Okay.
And they put the thermometer on the wall and they work towards that.
I love that. Yeah.
There's ultra runners, there's through hikers, there's, excuse me, there's, my mother did one. She's like, David, I'm going to walk 100 miles in the park over the course of the summer.
Wow.
And she walks every morning, and unfortunately, she broke her leg and didn't finish. But the intention was there. But it's really meant to be accessible to anyone at any level of intensity. You don't have to be an ultra athlete. Whatever it is you're doing that you want to layer a bit of extra meaning and purpose onto, that's what AFS is for.
So let's say someone has an adventure in mind. What's the next step that they have to take in order to be part of the Adventure for Someone campaign or fundraiser?
Yeah, it would be to reach out to me. So there's a few email addresses, but the easiest one is afs@bigcitymountaineers.org. And, or you can go onto the website. And I help you set up what is called your Classy page. It's a very easy plug and play fundraising platform that we use. I create your page. You tell me what your fundraising goal is. Again, any number is awesome. There is no high bar that we ask you to reach. And I can either create your page and your story for you, or you can write kind of your why. That is probably one of the more compelling pieces, and it's usually better if it comes from the person fundraising. And that explains to the folks that will be viewing this page as the people donating to your fundraising campaign why you're doing what you're doing. It kind of tells your story and your passion for this project. And then you start fundraising. We have simple toolkits for you to use to ask for money. A lot of the feedback we get is that asking for money is awkward, which is super true. It's even awkward for me, and I get paid to ask for money. And so we have some toolkits for you to use, again, to kind of just continue that plug and play so that you have templates, the language that we use at Big City Mountaineers, photos that we have already had cleared from past participants, from maybe some of our actual programs that you can send to your community and go from there.
Oh, wow. That's a great set of tools.
As you fundraise at certain stages and tiers, you get really nice stuff. So you get the warm fuzzy of helping a youth in our program have an experience, but you also stand to, earn some backpacks and base
Wow.
layers, and even at the highest level, like a guided trip.
So you start getting gear if you fundraise $500, which is, a slightly more accessible number than $5,000. And we have a lot of really awesome brand partners who were willing to donate gear for our fundraisers. And it's a wide range. We have everything from ski goggles and insect repellents and smart wool socks, to trekking poles. And, if you fundraise to another tier, Osprey backpacks, like proper backpacking backpacks. At our higher tiers, we have some really, really nice tents from Nemo. And if you are really shooting for the stars, we start offering experiences at our, I think, $2,500 and $5,000 fundraised tiers. A lot of these are more local to Colorado, but
Okay.
we're partnering with Golden Mountain Guides to offer some more educational courses on like rock climbing and ice climbing and building anchors. Avalanche courses as well for folks that want to feel safer when they're going backcountry skiing. So there's a little bit of a give back too, because we really want to acknowledge our gratitude, and recognize fundraising is hard. It can be awkward. And also attaching the fundraiser to an adventure, really does make a difference in the lives of youth from disinvested communities. And so it's our way of saying thank you, through these.
That's
incentives.
perfect. Wow.
The fundraising, or the gear packages are not just for the AFS campaign people. Anyone who donates to an AFS campaign is entered into a drawing, and the prize packages for those are really great too. So it's like Patagonia jackets, Nemo sleeping bags, Smartwool base layers, Yeti coolers, Osprey backpacks. Like, there's really cool stuff.
Wow.
So just by donating to any AFS campaign, you are actually able to win a gear package. Hopefully that's an incentive to donate. Also, and this was released, I think 3 weeks ago now, we have a great brand partner, Everyman Jack, and they are pledging up to $25,000 as a challenge match for any AFS donation. So if you donate to an Adventure for Someone campaign, Everyman Jack will match it up to $25K.
Oh my gosh. For how long?
Yeah. Until October 1st.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So
great timing,
it doubles your impact. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Wow. Okay. So on the subject of donations, where do the donations go that people give to BCM?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So if you donate money to BCM, that basically funds our programs directly. And it pays for our field instructors, our staff, food, permitting, transportation at times. There's some less glamorous things that are need to haves, like insurance. We need to pay for that. Gear storage, maintenance, repair, upkeep, staff salaries. But all of that stuff is directed towards the on-the-ground experience with youth. So we, on our website, have a place to see kind of like what it costs, what the all-in cost is to run a trip for a group, or what one day hike costs. And, like one day hike for one youth, all in is $125. An overnight experience is $250. A full group expedition, I think, is around $5,000. So there's ways to kind of calibrate what the money will go to. But everything really is mission directed. And we run very lean. We have a small staff with very little overhead. And we really ensure that all of the donations are put towards the thing that we're here to do in the world, which is to get youth outside on trail.
Perfect. I have a lot of guests, and I'm sure a lot of listeners, who are teachers, and they often use their summers to travel across country, go high pointing. And I'm wondering, maybe if they're listening and thinking like, I know a group of young people that could benefit from this. What's that bridge like between a youth group and BCM?
Great question. We only work via agency partnership or school partnership. It's not open enrollment. You can't just sign your kid up for BCM,
Right.
like in summer camp. So we, in each of our regions, would want to cultivate a list of schools, after-school programs, youth agencies who are interested in having a partnership with us. And we come in and plug into the existing program. Sometimes that's outdoor focused. I myself was a high school teacher that started my school's outdoor club way back in the 2000s. So like it could plug into that. Our Birmingham regional manager similarly was a teacher that started an outdoor club.
Okay.
After school programs, it's not always outdoors focused. Sometimes it's, college access focused, and they see real value in getting kids outside to build social emotional skills. And so we come in and plug in and partner with them. We have a list of criteria that we use to identify partner fit. And it's, demographics and communities served. It's, do you have capacity to provide transportation and take things on? We're really rigorous about that because for our partners and for the youth participants, it's completely free. Our partners pay like a $250 registration fee total, but what they're getting is about $25,000 of value.
Yeah.
So we want to be really careful about who we partner with to make sure that they're really going to utilize the resources that we can bring to bear. And it's completely subsidized. And kids will go home with a pair of shoes, a pair of socks, a water bottle, and a day pack that they keep. Because the message is, hey, this is just the start. Please keep hiking.
Wow,
so,
great.
if you live in one of our regions and you're interested in partnering with BCM, the best thing to do is get in touch with us. You can email info@bigcitymountaineers.org. Get in touch with us late summer, early fall, because that's when we start to reevaluate and bring new partners on.
Okay.
And one of our regional managers will be in touch and we'll talk to you about how to create a partnership.
How can people become involved with Big City Mountaineers? Now, we obviously know that if they want to plan their own adventure, they can do the Adventure for Someone campaign, and I will provide the links that Linnea mentioned in the show notes. But what are some other ways that they can get involved?
We are, in some of our regions, really fortunate to have a lot of interest, but that means we have to be choosy and selective.
Mm-hmm.
And what we look for, there's kind of two things to volunteer for. One is the on-trail experience, where you're going on the trips. And what we want for that is someone who has experience in the backcountry, who can kind of handle their own backpack and isn't going to need to be tended to. Someone who has experience working with youth, and specifically youth that come from the communities that we're working in. We do a background check, so you can't have a felony on your record or a criminal record. And there's an interview process and also a training process. And we need to know that the trail volunteers can be there for all three trip elements, the day hike, the overnight, and the backpacking trip. The consistency of relationship is really important. So, it's not a small commitment, but it's a really meaningful one. So that's one side of it. The other side is front country. We take volunteers too. For this, we don't need a background check. This we can engage corporate groups, groups of volunteers in other ways. And we need a lot of help just with kind of like logistics, packing trips in and out, organizing gear, getting the groups ready, bringing the groups back in, things like that. And those could be really fun too, to, help a kid figure out like how to pack their backpack or welcome them back when they get back from their trip.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are opportunities as well. We have a volunteer coordinator. Her name is Hillary. And if you email volunteering@bigcitymountaineers.org, she'll respond and kind of give you more information on what's possible.
Oh, that's great. I will include that in the show notes as well.
Do you want to talk about instructors?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So for outdoor education and outdoor adventure professionals, we hire seasonal instructors. And right now we're still hiring. So if there's anyone out there who holds a wilderness first responder certification and is interested in leading trips with BCM this summer, we'd love for you to get in touch. And you can email info@bigcitymountaineers.org for more information. On our careers page, we have a posting for instructors as well. But we'd love to hear from you. That'd be great.
Now, to close out, what are some final thoughts that you want listeners to know about accessibility and outdoor equity?
I think the big one is that the benefits of being outside, psychologically, neurologically, physiologically, mentally, you name it, are well enough known, that it is really, really impactful when you give back to groups that are working with youth from disinvested communities. And, unfortunately, as some of these disparities increase and these inequities increase, I think it is really important to, if you have the means, to give back to folks and communities and nonprofits and groups that don't have the access that you do, that we all do. And it's just really important to give people the time of day. Coming from a place of empathy, it's always really interesting sometimes going to tabling events and people are willing to spend $13 on their drinks and pass by the table and are less inclined to donate, which is great. Indulging is great. And just, if you can look at your personal experiences in the outdoors and recognize the amazing things that it gave you, maybe put that towards a group that's like Big City Mountaineers, that's giving those experiences to other people.
That's perfect. And you bring up a really good point, because one of the last questions I ask guests on the show about their high pointing is like, how has the outdoors affected or enriched your life? And that's when they start to get a little sentimental. No one's cried on the podcast, but I've seen some eyes get a little, glassy. And they'll just say, like, look, it's everything. It's made me who I am today. It's made me a better parent, a better friend, a better employee. Like, they just can't say enough about how the outdoors has benefited their lives. And if you can give back, I mean, what a great gift that is. So thanks for bringing that up, Linnea. And the last question that I ask every guest, do you have any outdoor adventure-based books, documentaries, or podcasts that you can recommend to other listeners?
Well, in the theme of equity, it takes me about like 6 months to read a book because I do way too much. And currently my main textbook is a 2,000-page EMT textbook. Get to read every night. It's great. And so I'm reading a book of short stories, which means I don't have to remember the previous chapter to be able to like continue on, and it's perfect. And it's called Been Outside, and it's a collection of stories and some poems written by people of color, women, non-binary folks, and their experiences outside. And they're very relatable anecdotes. And so it just paints a lot of mini perspectives of different people's experiences being outside when there are not very many people who look like them. The poems are beautiful and introspective, and the anecdotes are incredibly enlightening and powerful. And again, short stories. So you can read one and feel empowered or enlightened by it, and then put it down for a little bit. Yeah, Been Outside is a really, really awesome book.
That's perfect. Thank you. How about you, David?
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about books. My mom's a librarian, so I was raised in libraries and around books. And if I think back to like the first things that got me interested in a literary sense in the outdoors, it was John Krakauer's Into the Wild and Edward Abbey's Desert Solitaire. And that's probably a very male-centric thing from the 90s. But,
a lot of people mention John Krakauer in the podcast, and, Into the Wild has kind of a cult following, especially with the bus, which I understand was removed from...
Was removed, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give a really unconventional answer, and I'd be shocked if anyone has offered this. This came from my experience in the backcountry, and the longest hike I did was 300 miles in the Sierras. And when you think about doing something that long, if you've never done it, it's kind of daunting. And you're like, how do I take this on? And all the lessons that are packed into that. And a friend of mine on that trip, or before that trip, gave me a copy of the Tao Te Ching, which is a very short and very powerful piece of writing that's very old from China by Lao Tzu. And I specifically had the Stephen Mitchell translation of the Tao Te Ching, and it's this tiny little book, and I carried it with me and read it daily, sometimes multiple times a day while I was hiking, and had epiphanies. It just like, it really like right place, right time, right moment, right thinking. And when you're hiking, there's a lot of time to think, or hopefully not think. But the philosophy that it comes from is very earth-based, is very kind of in touch with the rhythms of nature. And I would recommend it to anyone that's doing something especially immersive and long outside, is take the Tao with you and take small bites of it as you go. So it's
that's really
not
interesting.
quite
And
it's not quite an outdoorsy thing, but
you're the
it
first
really
one
has helped
to
me.
say that one.
Yeah, it really has helped me as I've done outdoor stuff, kind of like wrap my head around the experience and make sense
That's
of
great.
not just that, but like the universe.
Wow. That's great. And whenever I ask this question, I never give my own answer, but I actually do want to say one now, because I just started a book yesterday. It's called On Trails, and it's about, you've heard of it, Linnea? Yeah, I can't wait to just finish this book because it is so good, but it's about just the history of trails and our interaction with them, and like even the animal kingdom and what it represents in humanity and in life, and this like need that we have as humans for direction and for order and for community. So great book and really great recommendations. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for your time. Because that's what I ask all guests for, is their time. There's really, there's nothing else involved in me reaching out to people. I only ask for their time, and you guys generously gave that. So thank you so much for being on my show, and thank you for what you do for the outdoor community.
Thank you, Lauren. It's really a pleasure to talk about this with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is a really awesome opportunity. And shout out to Dustin and Stacy for giving us this opportunity.
That's right.
Definitely.